Then marry me. 3 words. That's all it took to destroy everything Evan Brooks had spent 5 years building. The champagne glass slipped from Victoria Hale's fingers, shattering against the marble floor like his career, his dignity, his daughter's future. 40 executives stared. The most powerful woman in the city stood frozen, her birthday cake untouched, her eyes unreadable. And Evan, a single father in a borrowed catering uniform, realized he had just made the most catastrophic mistake of his life. Want to know how a careless joke became something no one expected? Stay until the end. Hit like and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The Grand Meridian Hotel had hosted 3 presidents, 2 royal weddings, and more corporate scandals than anyone cared to count. But on this particular Saturday evening in late October, it belonged entirely to Victoria Hale. Evan Brooks adjusted his bow tie for the 7th time as he pushed through the service entrance, the weight of exhaustion pressing against his shoulders like a physical thing. He had worked the lunch shift at Cafe Mirabelle, picked up Sophie from her after-school program, fed her dinner, helped with homework, and dropped her at Mrs. Patterson's apartment before racing across town to make this event. His feet ached, his back screamed, but the overtime pay would cover Sophie's dental appointment next week, and that was all that mattered. "You're late," Marcus hissed, shoving a silver tray into Evan's hands. "Station 3, champagne refills. Don't talk to anyone unless they talk to you first. And for the love of everything, don't spill." "Got it." "I mean it, Evan. This isn't some random corporate mixer. That's Victoria Hale's 50th birthday. Half the Fortune 500 is in that room. One mistake and we're both out." Evan nodded, already moving toward the ballroom doors. He had heard the name Victoria Hale before. Everyone in the city had. She ran Hale Industries, a conglomerate that touched everything from pharmaceuticals to real estate to technology. The company employed nearly 30,000 people nationwide. Her face appeared in business magazines, on morning news shows, at charity galas where a single table cost more than Evan made in a month. He had never given her much thought. People like Victoria Hale existed in a different universe, one where champagne came in crystal and problems could be solved with a phone call. Evan's universe involved bus schedules, expired coupons, and praying Sophie's winter coat from last year still fit. The ballroom doors swung open, and Evan stepped into another world. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across the ceiling like captured stars. Fresh flowers, roses, orchids, something exotic he couldn't name, cascaded from towering arrangements on every table. A string quartet played softly in the corner, their music nearly drowned by the hum of conversations conducted in low, powerful voices. Men in tailored suits clustered around a bar that seemed to stretch forever. Women in designer gowns moved through the crowd like ships navigating familiar waters. And at the center of it all, positioned near a 5-tier cake that probably cost more than his rent, stood Victoria Hale. She was smaller than he expected. The photographs in magazines always made her seem larger than life. Intimidating, untouchable, carved from something harder than ordinary flesh. But standing there in a deep burgundy gown, her silver hair swept into an elegant twist, she looked almost human, almost tired. Evan began his circuit, weaving between guests with practiced invisibility. Pour. Smile. Move on. Pour. Smile. Move on. He had perfected the art of being seen without being noticed, existing in the spaces between conversations, present but irrelevant. "The acquisition went through last week," a man near Station 2 was saying. "Hale Industries picked up 3 more patents. The woman's a machine." "A machine with excellent taste in champagne," his companion laughed. "Did you see the label? We're drinking $300 a bottle." Evan refilled their glasses without comment. $300. Sophie's dental appointment was $240. He could have bought her the appointment and had $60 left over for groceries. Instead, he was pouring it down the throats of people who wouldn't remember him by morning. He moved on. Near Station 4, a cluster of women in their 40s had gathered, their voices sharp with the particular cruelty of old friends. 50 years old and still alone, one was saying. You'd think with all that money she could at least buy someone to keep her company. She had someone, remember, that engagement to the Davenport boy? Fell apart 2 years ago. Because she's impossible. I heard she made him sign a prenuptial that ran longer than most novels. Can you imagine? No wonder he walked away. Well, someone has to be the first. Marry Victoria Hale? You'd spend your life feeling like an employee. They laughed, accepting champagne from Evan's tray without acknowledgement. He moved away, something uncomfortable settling in his chest. He didn't know Victoria Hale. He didn't care about Victoria Hale. But there was something about the way they spoke, casual, confident, certain that their subject would never hear, that reminded him too much of how people had talked about him after the divorce. Poor Evan, working 2 jobs while his wife moved on to someone with actual ambition. He shook off the memory and continued his route. The evening progressed with agonizing slowness. Evan's feet graduated from aching to numb. His smile became mechanical, a reflex rather than an expression. He watched executives exchange business cards, society matrons exchange gossip, and servers exchange exhausted glances whenever they passed each other. At 9:30, the cake ceremony began. Victoria Hale stood before the towering confection, surrounded by colleagues who weren't quite friends and acquaintances who weren't quite family. Someone had handed her a silver knife. Someone else had started the crowd singing "Happy Birthday" in voices that ranged from genuine to performative to clearly intoxicated. Evan found himself positioned near the side of the room, tray empty, watching the spectacle with detached curiosity. Victoria Hale smiled throughout the song, but he noticed that the expression never quite reached her eyes. She looked like someone waiting for something to end. The song finished. Applause erupted. Victoria leaned forward to cut the cake, and that's when everything went wrong. It started with a comment. "Another year older, Victoria." The voice belonged to a heavy-set man with a red face and an expensive watch. Harrison Wells, if Evan remembered correctly, one of the board members who had been mentioned during the pre-event briefing. You know what they say about women our age? Time to start thinking about legacy. A successor. Someone to leave all this to. Victoria's hand paused on the knife. "I have plenty of time to think about legacy, Harrison." "Do you, though?" His tone was jovial, but something ugly lurked beneath the surface. 50 is a milestone. No husband, no children. No one to carry on the Hale name. People are starting to talk. "People have been talking since I was 23 and refused to marry my father's choice of business partner," Victoria replied, her voice cool. "I've survived the conversation so far." "But wouldn't it be easier if you just found someone? Settled down?" Victoria cut the first slice of cake with more force than necessary. "Tell me, Harrison, when was the last time someone asked you when you were going to find a wife? When someone suggested that your legacy depended on your relationship status rather than your business achievements?" The crowd had gone quiet, sensing tension. Harrison's face reddened further. "I'm just saying, Victoria, a woman in your position—" "A woman in my position has built a company worth $14 billion, Victoria interrupted. "A woman in my position has created jobs, funded research, transformed industries. A woman in my position does not need a husband to validate her existence, and a woman in my position is getting very tired of being told otherwise." Harrison opened his mouth to respond, but someone else, a younger executive Evan didn't recognize, jumped in first, clearly trying to defuse the situation. "Come on, Victoria. You know Harrison doesn't mean anything by it. It's your birthday. We should be celebrating, not debating. Besides," he grinned, looking around the room for support, "maybe the right person just hasn't asked you yet. Maybe you're waiting for some handsome stranger to sweep you off your feet." Laughter rippled through the crowd, breaking the tension. Victoria's expression shifted from irritation to something more guarded, and she managed a small smile. "I suppose anything's possible," she said dryly, "although I doubt any handsome strangers would be brave enough to try." And that's when Evan spoke. He didn't mean to. He wasn't even paying full attention. He had been thinking about Sophie, about the dental appointment, about the 45-minute bus ride home after this endless evening. He had been thinking about his own failed marriage, about how people had judged him for not being enough, about the cruelty of being reduced to your relationship status in front of a crowd. He had been thinking about how tired Victoria Hale looked, standing there in her expensive gown, defending her right to exist without a partner. And somewhere between the thought and the silence, the word slipped out. "Then marry me." The room stopped. Evan felt the words leave his mouth and immediately wished he could grab them back, shove them into whatever part of his brain had malfunctioned, pretend they had never existed. But it was too late. The words were out, floating in the sudden, terrible silence like bombs waiting to detonate. Victoria Hale turned slowly, her gaze finding him across the room. He saw her take in the uniform, the empty tray, the expression of absolute horror that he knew was plastered across his face. 40 executives stared. The string quartet had stopped playing. Even the servers had frozen, their trays suspended in midair like props in a photograph. Evan started, but no words came. Victoria said nothing. Her face revealed nothing. She simply set down the cake knife, handed her champagne glass to the nearest person, and walked toward the exit. She didn't run, she didn't make a scene. She simply left, her heels clicking against the marble floor with measured precision, her posture perfect, her dignity intact. The ballroom doors closed behind her with a sound that felt like a verdict. Then the room exploded. "Who is that?" someone demanded. "Did he just... A caterer? Seriously? Did a caterer just propose to Victoria Hale? Someone get security. Is this some kind of joke?" Marcus materialized beside Evan, his face a mask of fury and panic. "What did you do? What the hell did you just do?" I didn't mean... The service entrance, now, before someone calls the police." Evan let himself be pushed toward the back of the room, moving through a sea of shocked faces and whispered outrage. He caught fragments of conversation as he went. Probably trying to get a settlement. Some kind of setup. Poor Victoria having to deal with... The service corridor was cold and bright after the ballroom's warmth. Evan stumbled against the wall, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might crack his ribs. "You're done," Marcus was saying. "You understand that, right? You're completely, totally done. They'll fire both of us. They'll sue the catering company. They'll..." "I know." Evan's voice came out hollow. "I know." "Why? Why would you say something like that? To her, of all people?" "I don't know." He pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. "I wasn't thinking. She looked tired and they were being cruel to her, and I wasn't thinking." "You weren't thinking." Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You just propositioned a billionaire because you weren't thinking. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic." Evan said nothing. There was nothing to say. He changed out of the uniform in the staff locker room, his movements mechanical, his mind already racing through the consequences. He would lose this job. Probably lose his position at the cafe too, once word got around. The catering company would want to distance themselves immediately. References would be impossible. And Sophie? The thought of his daughter cut through the panic like a blade. How would he explain this? How would he tell her that Daddy had done something stupid, something that might mean no more dance classes, no more dental appointments, no more stability? He had spent 5 years building something from the wreckage of his marriage, a tiny apartment that was theirs, a routine that worked, a life that was small but survivable, and he had just burned it all down with 3 careless words. The bus ride home took 47 minutes. Evan sat in the back, staring out the window at streets that blurred into meaningless patterns of light and shadow. His phone buzzed constantly, texts from Marcus, from other servers who had heard what happened, from numbers he didn't recognize. He turned it off. Mrs. Patterson was waiting when he arrived, Sophie asleep on her couch with a book still clutched in her small hands. "Late night," the elderly woman observed, handing over his daughter's backpack. "Everything okay?" "Fine." The lie came easily. "Just a long event." "She did her homework, read 2 chapters of her book, asked when you'd be home about 6 times. Evan managed a smile. "Sounds about right. Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. I'll see you Monday." He carried Sophie down the hall, her weight familiar and grounding against his chest. She stirred as he unlocked their apartment door. "Daddy?" "Hey, Bug, we're home. Back to sleep." "Did you have a good day?" The question was so innocent, so trusting, that Evan felt his throat tighten. "It was a day," he said carefully. "How about yours?" "Mrs. Patterson let me have cookies." Sophie yawned, already drifting back toward sleep. "The good kind, with chocolate chips. That sounds pretty great." "Daddy?" "Yeah, Bug?" "You smell like fancy food." He laughed despite everything, tucking her into bed, pressing a kiss against her forehead. I worked at a big party tonight. Lots of fancy food. Was it fun? Evan looked at his daughter's face, her mother's eyes, his stubborn chin, the gap-toothed smile that made everything else bearable, and felt the weight of his mistake pressing down like a physical force. It was interesting, he said finally. Sleep now. Big day tomorrow. She was asleep before he finished the sentence. Evan sat on the edge of her bed for a long time, watching the rise and fall of her breathing, thinking about what he had done and what it might cost. Tomorrow he would have to figure out next steps. Tomorrow he would have to face the consequences, find new work, explain to whoever asked why his career had suddenly imploded. But tonight, in the quiet of their small apartment, with his daughter safe and sleeping, he allowed himself one moment of something that felt almost like peace. Whatever happened next, he would handle it. He always did. The call came Monday morning. Evan had just dropped Sophie at school. His phone finally turned back on after a weekend of dread-filled avoidance. He was walking toward the cafe, rehearsing in his head what he would say to his manager, some version of the truth that didn't sound completely insane, when the screen lit up with an unfamiliar number. Mr. Brooks? The voice was professionally pleasant, the kind of tone that announced important business. Yes? This is Patricia Webb, executive assistant to Ms. Victoria Hale. Ms. Hale would like to meet with you this afternoon. 3 o'clock at the Hale Industries headquarters. Would that be convenient? Evan stopped walking. A man behind him nearly collided with his back, muttered something unpleasant, and detoured around him. I'm sorry, what? Ms. Hale would like to meet with you, Patricia Webb repeated, her tone suggesting she delivered this kind of message regularly. 3 o'clock. I can send a car if transportation is a concern. Evan's mind raced through possibilities. A meeting meant something. A lawsuit? A settlement demand? A formal humiliation before security escorted him from the building? Mr. Brooks? 3 o'clock, he heard himself say. I'll be there. Excellent. Please arrive at the main entrance and give your name to reception. They'll direct you from there. The line went dead. Evan stood on the sidewalk for several minutes, the city moving around him while he tried to process what had just happened. Victoria Hale wanted to see him. The woman he had accidentally proposed to in front of 40 executives wanted to have a meeting. Nothing about that could possibly be good. He called in sick to the cafe, the first time in 3 years, and spent the next several hours pacing his apartment, alternating between terror and a strange, inappropriate curiosity. What could Victoria Hale possibly want to say to him? What could he possibly say to her? Sorry I publicly embarrassed you at your own birthday party didn't seem sufficient. I wasn't trying to propose. I was just making a poorly timed joke seemed even worse. By 2:30, Evan had changed clothes 4 times, settled on his best non-work outfit, dark jeans, a button-down shirt, the blazer he had bought for Sophie's kindergarten graduation, and stood before the bathroom mirror trying to remember how to look like someone who hadn't completely ruined his life. The reflection staring back at him wasn't encouraging. 34 years old, but the exhaustion made him look older. Lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 5 years ago. A haircut that was 3 weeks overdue because haircuts cost $20, and $20 was Sophie's art supply money. He looked like what he was, a man who had been running on empty for too long, who had made one stupid mistake and was about to pay for it in ways he couldn't yet imagine. At 2:45, he left for Hale Industries. The building was a monument to money and power, rising 40 floors into the city skyline, all glass and steel, and the kind of architecture that announced importance without saying a word. Evan had walked past it hundreds of times without ever imagining he might go inside. The lobby was marble and chrome, staffed by security personnel who looked like they could bench press his apartment. Evan gave his name to the reception desk, waited while someone made a phone call, and tried not to feel like a specimen under examination. Mr. Brooks? A young woman in a perfectly tailored suit appeared beside him. I'm Patricia Webb. If you'll follow me? The elevator ride to the 39th floor was silent. Patricia Webb made no small talk, answered no questions, revealed nothing about what awaited him. When the doors opened, she led him down a corridor lined with original artwork and into an outer office that probably cost more to furnish than his entire apartment. Ms. Hale will see you shortly. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? No, thank you. Very well. Please have a seat. Evan sat in a leather chair that probably cost more than his car and waited. The minutes stretched, each one longer than the last. He could hear faint sounds from behind the closed office door, a voice occasionally, though he couldn't make out words. His palms were sweating, his heart was pounding. Every instinct he possessed was screaming at him to run. The door opened. "Mr. Brooks?" Patricia Webb stood in the doorway. "Ms. Hale is ready for you." The walk from the waiting area to Victoria Hale's office felt like the walk to an execution chamber. Evan entered the room, heard the door close behind him, and found himself face to face with the woman whose birthday party he had accidentally ruined. She was sitting behind a desk that could have doubled as a landing strip, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of the entire city. In the afternoon light, without the crowds and the champagne and the crystal chandeliers, she looked different, smaller, older, more human. "Mr. Brooks." Her voice was calm, professional, completely unreadable. "Please sit down." He sat. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Victoria Hale studied him with eyes that seemed to see everything: his cheap blazer, his nervous hands, the terror he couldn't quite hide. "You're probably wondering why I asked you here," she said finally. "The thought had crossed my mind. I'm not going to sue you if that's your concern." Something in Evan's chest loosened slightly. "That's good to know. And I've already spoken with the catering company. They won't be terminating your employment based on what happened Saturday night." The relief was almost dizzying. "Thank you. You didn't have to—" "No," Victoria interrupted. "I didn't. But I've had some time to think since Saturday, and I've come to realize that punishing you for an awkward comment would be both petty and pointless." She paused. "Also, your comment wasn't entirely unwarranted." Evan blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Harrison Wells has been making remarks about my personal life for 15 years. Other board members have been doing the same. I've spent decades building this company, and there are still people who think my greatest failure is not finding a husband." Something flickered in her expression, bitterness maybe, or exhaustion. "When you said what you said, part of me was relieved, I suppose, that someone had finally said something outrageous enough to make the whole conversation stop." "I wasn't trying to make a statement," Evan said carefully. "I was just, I don't know. You looked tired. They were being cruel. I wasn't thinking." "I know." Victoria leaned back in her chair. "That's actually what interested me. Most people who approach me want something: money, influence, access. You appear to want nothing except to say something absurd and immediately regret it." "I definitely achieved the second part." The corner of her mouth twitched. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. "Tell me about yourself, Mr. Brooks." The question caught him off guard. "What would you like to know?" "Whatever you'd like to share. I find myself curious about the man who proposed to me in front of 40 corporate executives." Evan considered his options. He could deflect, offer some polite non-answer, escape this conversation with whatever dignity he had left. But something about the way Victoria Hale was looking at him, not with judgment or amusement, but with genuine, tired curiosity, made him want to tell the truth. "My name is Evan Brooks. I'm 34 years old. I work 2 jobs, 3 if you count the catering gigs, to support my daughter. Her name is Sophie. She's 6. She likes books about dinosaurs and cookies with chocolate chips and asking questions I don't know how to answer." "And her mother?" "Moved to California with her new husband 3 years ago. We share custody in theory, but in practice, Sophie lives with me full-time." "That must be difficult." "It is what it is." Evan shrugged. "I wasn't enough for my ex-wife. She wanted ambition, drive, someone who was going places. I wanted to be present for my daughter. We wanted different things." Victoria nodded slowly. "I understand that particular incompatibility." "Your engagement?" "My engagement." She said the words like they left a bad taste. "Richard Davenport. Old money, good family, excellent business connections. Our fathers arranged the introduction when I was 43. For a while, I convinced myself it could work." "What happened?" "He wanted a wife who would enhance his social standing. I wanted a partner who would see me as something other than an asset to be managed. We were both disappointed." The silence that followed was different from before, less tense, more contemplative. Evan found himself looking at Victoria Hale not as a billionaire or a CEO or a symbol of everything he could never attain, but as a person. A person who had been evaluated and found wanting, just like him. A person who knew what it felt like to be reduced to their usefulness. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You may." "Why am I really here? You could have just told the catering company not to fire me. You didn't have to meet with me personally." Victoria was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was different, softer, less guarded. "Because in 15 years of boardroom meetings and charity galas and corporate functions, you're the first person who has ever looked at me like I was someone worth defending rather than someone worth impressing." She met his eyes. "I wanted to know who you were. I wanted to understand why." Evan didn't know what to say to that. The honesty of it, the vulnerability beneath the corporate armor, left him speechless. "I should let you go," Victoria said finally, her professional mask sliding back into place. "I'm sure you have other obligations. My daughter's school ends at 3:30. I need to pick her up." "Of course." They stood at the same time. Victoria extended her hand and Evan shook it, noting that her grip was firm but not aggressive, warm but not intimate. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Brooks. And for listening. Thank you for not having me arrested." That almost smile again. "The afternoon is young." Evan walked to the door, already processing the strangeness of the last hour, already wondering what any of it meant. His hand was on the handle when Victoria's voice stopped him. "Mr. Brooks?" He turned. "Your comment at the party. Did you mean any of it?" The question hung in the air between them, impossible and ridiculous and somehow impossibly serious. "No," Evan said honestly. "I was just trying to make you feel less alone in that moment." Victoria nodded slowly. "That might be the kindest thing anyone has done for me in years." The door closed behind him. Evan walked to the elevator, rode down 39 floors, and stepped out into the late afternoon sunlight of a city that suddenly felt different. Something had changed in Victoria Hale's office. He wasn't sure what. He wasn't sure it mattered. But as he hurried toward Sophie's school, weaving through crowds of people who would never know what had just happened, Evan couldn't shake the feeling that the conversation wasn't over. It was just beginning. The weeks that followed the meeting in Victoria Hale's office settled into an uneasy normalcy that Evan couldn't quite trust. He returned to his routines, the morning shift at Café Mirabelle, the afternoon pickup at Sophie's school, the evening homework sessions that sometimes stretched past her bedtime, the weekend catering gigs that kept the bills paid and the refrigerator stocked. But something had shifted beneath the surface of his life, something he couldn't name or explain, and he found himself thinking about Victoria Hale at odd moments throughout his days. He thought about her when he poured coffee for customers who never looked at his face. He thought about her when Sophie asked why some people lived in big houses and some people lived in apartments. He thought about her late at night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what it felt like to build an empire and still be treated like a problem to be solved rather than a person to be known. 3 weeks after their meeting, his phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Brooks? This is Patricia Webb." Evan nearly dropped the coffee pot he was holding. "Miss Webb, is everything okay? Ms. Hale would like to invite you to dinner this Friday evening, 7 o'clock, at the Harbor View restaurant. She asked me to emphasize that this is not a business meeting and that you are under no obligation to accept." The words didn't make sense. Evan stepped away from the counter, lowering his voice so his coworkers wouldn't hear. "Dinner? With Ms. Hale?" "That's correct. Should I tell her you're available?" His mind raced through logistics. Friday evening meant finding childcare for Sophie. Friday evening meant affording whatever Harbor View charged for a glass of water. Friday evening meant sitting across from a woman worth $14 billion and pretending that was somehow normal. "Mr. Brooks?" "Yes," he heard himself say. "Tell her yes." "Excellent. A car will pick you up at 6:30. Please text this number with your address." The line went dead before he could ask any of the questions crowding his mind. What did Victoria Hale want with him? Why dinner? Why now? What was he supposed to wear to a restaurant he couldn't afford to look at, let alone eat in? He spent the rest of his shift distracted, making wrong change twice and forgetting a customer's order entirely. His manager gave him a concerned look but said nothing. Evan was grateful for the silence. He didn't have any explanations that would make sense. That evening, after Sophie was in bed, he called the one person who might understand. "You're having dinner with who?" Marcus's voice came through the phone, incredulous and slightly awed. "Victoria Hale, the woman from the birthday party. The woman you accidentally proposed to in front of 40 executives? That's the one. And she invited you to dinner? Like a date dinner? Or an I'm going to sue you over appetizers dinner?" Her assistant said it wasn't a business meeting. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Evan, what the hell is happening in your life?" "I have no idea." "Is this some kind of rich person thing? Like she's bored and wants entertainment? Or she's writing a book about weird things that happen at parties?" "I don't know." Evan rubbed his eyes. "I really don't know." "Well, whatever it is, you need to go. This is the kind of story that gets told at dinner parties for the next 30 years. Remember when Evan had dinner with that billionaire? We'll dine out on this forever. I'm glad my confusing life situation provides you with future social currency." "That's what friends are for." Marcus paused. "Seriously, though, are you okay? This is weird, right? This is objectively weird?" "It's extremely weird. But you're going." Evan thought about Victoria Hale's face in her office, the moment when her mask had slipped and he had seen something real underneath, the exhaustion, the loneliness, the surprise that someone had tried to defend her rather than impress her. "Yeah," he said, "I'm going." Friday arrived faster than Evan expected. He arranged for Mrs. Patterson to watch Sophie overnight. A work thing, he explained vaguely, might run late, and spent an hour agonizing over his limited wardrobe before settling on the same blazer from his meeting at Hale Industries, paired with a slightly better shirt he had been saving for job interviews. The car that arrived at 6:30 was black, expensive, and driven by a man who introduced himself as Thomas, and then said nothing else for the entire 20-minute drive. Evan sat in the back seat, watching the city slide past the tinted windows, feeling like an actor who had wandered onto the wrong set. Harbor View was exactly what its name suggested. A restaurant perched on the waterfront, all floor-to-ceiling windows and soft lighting, and the kind of quiet elegance that announced serious money without being vulgar about it. Evan stepped out of the car and immediately felt underdressed, even though no one had looked at him yet. "Mr. Brooks?" A hostess materialized beside him. "Ms. Hale is expecting you. Right this way." The restaurant was half full, the tables spaced far enough apart to ensure privacy, the conversations conducted in murmurs that blended with the soft jazz playing from hidden speakers. Evan followed the hostess past couples who probably spent more on wine than he made in a week, past businessmen closing deals over Wagyu beef, past a world that had never included him, and likely never would. Victoria Hale was seated at a corner table with a view of the harbor. She was wearing something simpler than her birthday gown, a deep blue dress, minimal jewelry, her silver hair loose around her shoulders. When she saw him approaching, she stood. "Mr. Brooks, thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me." He took the seat across from her, trying not to look as out of place as he felt. "Although I have to admit, I'm not entirely sure why I'm here." "Honestly?" Victoria smiled, and it reached her eyes this time. "Neither am I." A waiter appeared with menus and a wine list that Evan didn't dare open. Victoria ordered a bottle of something French, asked for sparkling water as well, and waved away the menus entirely. "Do you trust me to order for both of us? The chef here is a friend. I usually let him surprise me." "Sure." Evan had no idea what any of the menu items were anyway. "Surprises are good." The waiter disappeared. Victoria leaned back in her chair, studying Evan with the same intense curiosity she had shown in her office. "You're nervous," she observed. "I'm sitting in a restaurant that probably costs more than my monthly rent, having dinner with someone worth $14 billion, wearing a blazer I bought at a discount store 3 years ago." Evan shrugged. "Nervous seems like a reasonable response." "Fair enough." Victoria accepted a glass of wine from the returning waiter, waited for him to pour Evan's, and then raised her glass. "To unexpected conversations." "To unexpected conversations." They drank. The wine was better than anything Evan had ever tasted, though he suspected that had more to do with its price tag than his palate. "I want to be honest with you," Victoria said, setting down her glass. "I've been thinking about our conversation in my office, about what you said." "Which part?" "The part where you told me you were just trying to make me feel less alone." Evan nodded slowly. I remember. No one has ever said anything like that to me before. Not in business, not in personal relationships, not in any context. Victoria's voice was steady, but Evan could hear something vulnerable beneath the surface. I've spent my entire adult life being managed, being positioned, being optimized for maximum effectiveness. The idea that someone might simply want me to feel less alone without wanting anything in return is genuinely foreign to me. That's, Evan searched for the right word. That's really sad. Yes, Victoria laughed softly. It is. I've built a company that employs 30,000 people, and I can count on one hand the number of genuine conversations I've had in the last decade. What about friends, family? My parents are gone. My brother and I haven't spoken in 15 years. Long story, mostly involving money and resentment. As for friends, she paused. I have colleagues I respect, acquaintances I tolerate, people who want access to my resources or my influence. But friends? People who would call me at 2 in the morning because they needed to talk? I'm not sure I've ever had that. The food arrived, small, beautiful plates of things Evan couldn't identify, but which tasted extraordinary. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, and Evan found himself relaxing despite everything. Victoria Hale wasn't performing. She wasn't managing an impression. She was just talking like a person, and somehow that made the absurdity of the situation feel almost normal. Tell me about your daughter, Victoria said eventually. Sophie, right? What's she like? The question surprised him. People rarely asked about Sophie. His world was full of customers who wanted coffee, managers who wanted hours filled, bills that wanted paying. No one wanted to hear about a 6-year-old's dinosaur obsession. She's the best thing that ever happened to me, Evan said simply. She's smart. Smarter than I was at her age, probably smarter than I am now. She asks questions I don't know how to answer. Last week she wanted to know why the sky is blue during the day but red at sunset, and I had to look it up while pretending I knew all along. Victoria smiled. Did you find the answer? Something about light waves and the atmosphere. She seemed satisfied, but I'm pretty sure she could tell I was reading from my phone. Children are perceptive that way. She is. Evan took a sip of his wine. She's also kind. Genuinely kind, not performing it because she thinks she should. When kids at school are having a hard time, she notices. She tries to help. I don't know where she got that from. Not from me, probably. I'm too tired most of the time to notice much of anything. You noticed me. The words hung in the air between them. Evan met Victoria's eyes and saw something there he couldn't quite identify. Curiosity, maybe, or something deeper. At the party, I mean, Victoria continued, you noticed that I was tired, that people were being cruel, that I needed someone to say something unexpected. Most people in that room were too focused on their own agendas to see anything real about me. I wasn't working an agenda. I was just trying to survive until the end of my shift. Maybe that's why you could see what others couldn't. They finished dinner, then dessert, something chocolate and intricate that Evan knew he would dream about later, and then coffee. The restaurant emptied around them, couples drifting away, businessmen paying astronomical tabs without blinking. Victoria made no move to leave, and Evan found he didn't want the evening to end. Can I ask you something personal? He said. You can ask. I reserve the right not to answer. Your engagement, the one that ended. What really happened? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Outside the windows, the harbor lights reflected off the dark water like scattered stars. Richard was perfect on paper, she said finally. Old money, good family, excellent reputation. Our fathers had known each other for decades. When we were introduced, everyone assumed it was a foregone conclusion. Victoria Hale and Richard Davenport uniting two powerful families, creating a dynasty. But Richard didn't want a partner. He wanted a trophy, someone to stand beside him at events, to enhance his social standing, to produce heirs who would carry on the family name. Victoria's voice hardened. He made it clear very early that my role was to support his ambitions, not pursue my own. When I told him I had no intention of stepping back from Hale Industries, he suggested I could maintain a ceremonial position while he handled the real work. And you said? I said several things that I won't repeat in polite company. Victoria smiled grimly. The engagement ended 3 days later. He told everyone I was too difficult to love. I told everyone I was too valuable to waste. You were right. Victoria looked at him sharply. Most people think I was foolish, that I should have compromised, that having someone, even someone who saw me as an asset rather than a person, was better than being alone. Most people are wrong. Evan leaned forward. You deserve someone who sees you, not your money, not your company, not your usefulness. You, the person underneath all of it. And how do you know there's a person underneath all of it? Maybe the company is all there is. Because I watched you at that party. I watched you stand there while people made jokes about your personal life, while they reduced you to your relationship status, while they talked about you like you were a problem to be solved rather than a human being to be respected. And I saw how tired you were, how much it cost you to keep smiling. Victoria said nothing. That's not someone who's nothing but a company, Evan continued. That's someone who's been performing so long she's forgotten there's anything else. But there is. I saw it. The silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like the silence between two people who were both thinking, both processing, both trying to figure out what came next. You're very strange, Mr. Brooks, Victoria said finally. Evan, if we're going to keep having dinners like this, you should probably call me Evan. Very well. Evan, she tested the name like she was tasting wine. And you should call me Victoria. Victoria. They looked at each other across the table, and Evan felt something shift between them, some barrier lowering, some wall coming down. He didn't know what it meant. He didn't know if it meant anything at all. But in that moment, sitting across from a woman who had built an empire and still felt alone, he felt less alone himself. I should get you home, Victoria said, glancing at her watch. You probably need to pick up your daughter in the morning. Mrs. Patterson is keeping her overnight. But yeah, I should probably go. Work tomorrow. The cafe? Saturday shift, 6 to 2. Victoria nodded, and something flickered in her expression. Something that might have been disappointment, quickly hidden. Thomas will take you home. And Evan? Yes? Thank you for tonight, for being honest, for treating me like a person instead of a position. Thank you for dinner, and for not having me arrested at the party. That almost smile again. The threat still stands. The drive home was quiet, but Evan's mind was racing. He didn't know what was happening between him and Victoria Hale. He didn't know if it was anything at all, just two lonely people sharing a conversation, nothing more. But as Thomas pulled up to his apartment building and he stepped out into the cool night air, Evan found himself hoping there would be another dinner, another conversation, another chance to see what was beneath the surface. The second dinner happened 2 weeks later, then a third, a fourth. Each time, Victoria's assistant called with the same professional courtesy. Each time, Evan said yes. Each time, they talked for hours about his life, her life, Sophie's latest discoveries, the absurdities of corporate politics, the challenges of building something real in a world that valued performance over substance. They never talked about what they were doing. They never put a name to it. But Evan noticed that Victoria seemed lighter after their conversations, that her smiles came more easily, that she asked about Sophie with genuine interest rather than polite obligation. He also noticed that people at work had started looking at him differently. It started small. A comment from Marcus about how Evan seemed distracted lately, a raised eyebrow from his manager when he asked for another Friday evening off, a whisper he couldn't quite catch from two servers at a catering event. Then the rumors began. Evan first heard them directly 3 weeks after the fourth dinner, standing in the break room at Cafe Mirabelle, while two coworkers talked in the corner without realizing he was there. I heard he's been seeing someone rich, like really rich, someone from that birthday party where he made a scene. You mean the guy who proposed to the CEO? That was a joke, right? Apparently not. Apparently they've been having dinner together, multiple times. No way. Why would someone like that have dinner with someone like him? I don't know, but people are talking. Someone said he's using his daughter to get close to her. You know, playing the struggling single dad card to make himself look sympathetic. Evan felt the words hit him like physical blows. Using Sophie, playing a card, making himself look sympathetic. He walked out of the break room without saying anything, but the damage was done. The rumors were out there, spreading through the catering network, the restaurant community, the interconnected web of people who worked the same events and shared the same gossip. By the end of the month, it had reached Hale Industries. Victoria called him directly for the first time on a Tuesday evening, her voice tight with something Evan couldn't immediately identify. "We need to talk. Can you come to my office tomorrow?" "What's wrong?" "Just come." "Please." He arrived at 3 o'clock, the same time as his first visit, the same walk through the marble lobby and the silent elevator ride and the expensive waiting area. But this time, when Patricia Webb led him into Victoria's office, something was different. Victoria wasn't sitting behind her desk. She was standing at the window, staring out at the city, her posture rigid. "Close the door," she said, without turning around. Evan closed it. "Victoria, what's going on?" "Someone on the board has been asking questions about you. About us." She turned finally, and Evan saw that her face was carefully blank, the corporate mask firmly in place. "They want to know why the CEO of Hale Industries has been having dinner with a caterer. They want to know if I've lost my mind. They want to know if you're trying to take advantage of me." "Take advantage of you?" Evan felt anger flare in his chest. "I haven't asked you for anything. Not money, not favors, not— I know that, but they don't. And apparently there are rumors circulating that you're using your daughter to manipulate me, that you're playing the struggling single father to earn my sympathy and get access to my resources." The anger turned cold. "Who said that?" "It doesn't matter who said it. What matters is that people believe it. What matters is that my board members are questioning my judgment, my employees are whispering in hallways, and apparently someone has started looking into your background to find evidence of past manipulations or financial schemes." "There's nothing to find. I'm a single father who works 2 jobs and occasionally caters parties. That's the whole story." "I believe you." Victoria's voice softened slightly. "But belief isn't enough in my world. In my world, perception is reality. And right now, the perception is that Victoria Hale has made a fool of herself over an inappropriate relationship with someone who is using her for personal gain." Evan stood very still, processing the implications. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about Victoria's position, her authority, her ability to run the company she had built. His presence in her life, however innocent, however mutual, was becoming a weapon that others could use against her. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I don't know." Victoria turned back to the window. "Part of me wants to tell them all to go to hell. I'm the CEO. I can have dinner with whoever I want. My personal life is none of their business." But they're making it their business. And if I don't address it, if I don't control the narrative, they'll control it for me. They'll turn you into a scandal. They'll turn our dinners into evidence of my declining judgment. They'll use this as ammunition the next time they want to challenge my decisions or undermine my authority. So we stop having dinner. The words tasted bitter. We go back to being strangers. Victoria turned to face him. "Is that what you want?" "No." The honesty surprised him. "But I don't want to be the reason you lose everything you've built. I'm not worth that. You don't get to decide what you're worth to me." The silence that followed was heavy with things unsaid. Evan looked at Victoria Hale, this woman who had built an empire and still felt alone, who had invited him into her life for reasons neither of them fully understood, who was now facing consequences she hadn't anticipated because she had dared to treat him like a person instead of a liability. "I have a daughter," he said finally. "She's 6 years old. She's the only thing in my life that matters more than survival. And right now, someone is using her, her existence, my love for her, to attack you, to paint me as a manipulator, to make our dinners into something ugly. Evan, that's not okay with me. That's not something I can just ignore because I like having dinner with you." His voice hardened. "If people want to attack me, fine. I've been attacked before. But they don't get to use Sophie. They don't get to turn my daughter into evidence of my moral failings." Victoria's expression shifted. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to fight back. I don't know how yet, but I'm not going to let them turn this into something it isn't. And I'm not going to let them use you either." "Use me?" "They're not really attacking me. I'm nobody. They're attacking you, using me as the weapon. They want you to feel ashamed of spending time with someone beneath your station. They want you to question your judgment. They want you to doubt yourself." Evan stepped closer. "Don't give them that. Don't let them win. Victoria stared at him for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. A real laugh, surprised and genuine. "You're really something, Evan Brooks. I'm a tired single father who accidentally proposed to a billionaire and somehow ended up here. I don't know what I am." "You're someone who fights for people, even when you probably shouldn't." Victoria's voice softened. "Even when it might cost you." "I fight for people who matter. You matter." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Neither of them was ready to examine too closely. Victoria looked at Evan, and Evan looked at Victoria. And in the space between them, something new began to take shape. Something that wasn't quite friendship, wasn't quite romance, but was undeniably real. "There's a board meeting next week," Victoria said finally. "Harrison Wells has put together a presentation about leadership concerns. Everyone knows it's about us. About you. What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet." She paused. "But I think it's time to stop letting other people define what's acceptable. I've spent 50 years being told who I should love, how I should live, what I should want. I'm tired of it. So fight back. And if I lose, then you lose, but at least you lose on your own terms. At least you know you stood up for what was real instead of what was safe." Victoria nodded slowly, and Evan saw something shift in her expression, the corporate mask cracking, the person underneath emerging. "Will you come to the meeting?" she asked. "Not as a participant, just as someone who's there. Someone who sees me. If you want me there, I'll be there. I want you there. Then I'll come." They stood in silence as the afternoon light shifted through the windows, casting long shadows across Victoria's office. Evan didn't know what the board meeting would bring. He didn't know if their dinners would continue, or if this fragile connection would be destroyed by corporate politics and social expectations. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever happened next, he wasn't going to let them turn something real into something shameful, not without a fight. The week before the board meeting crawled past with agonizing slowness. Evan worked his shifts at the cafe, picked up Sophie from school, helped with homework, maintained the rhythms of ordinary life while something extraordinary gathered on the horizon like a storm. He found himself checking his phone constantly, expecting messages from Victoria or Patricia Webb, expecting the whole fragile situation to collapse before the meeting even happened. But the calls didn't come. Victoria had gone quiet, preparing for what she knew would be a battle, and Evan was left to wait and wonder and imagine all the ways this could end badly. Sophie noticed the change in him. She was perceptive that way, picking up on tensions that adults tried to hide. "Daddy, are you worried about something?" They were sitting at their small kitchen table, Sophie working through a math worksheet while Evan pretended to read the newspaper. He looked up at her question, saw the concern in her eyes, and felt his heart crack a little. "I have a meeting next week," he said carefully. "An important one. I'm just thinking about it a lot." "What kind of meeting?" "A work thing, kind of." Sophie considered this, her pencil pausing over a multiplication problem. "Is it the kind of meeting where people might be mean to you?" Evan blinked. "What makes you ask that?" "Sometimes kids at school have meetings with teachers when they're in trouble. The kids always look worried before, like you look now." She tilted her head. "Are you in trouble, Daddy?" "No, Bug, I'm not in trouble." The lie came easily, but it tasted wrong. "Someone I know might be, though, and I want to help them." "That's good. You're good at helping people." Sophie returned to her worksheet, the matter apparently settled in her mind. "Mrs. Patterson says you have a helper's heart. That means you care about people more than yourself." Evan stared at his daughter, overwhelmed by the simple clarity of her understanding. A helper's heart. He had never thought of himself that way. He had just been surviving, putting one foot in front of the other, trying to give Sophie a life that was stable, if not spectacular. But maybe that was what helping looked like. Not grand gestures or dramatic rescues, but showing up, day after day, even when it was hard. "Can I meet your friend?" Sophie asked suddenly. "The one who might be in trouble?" "Maybe someday. She's very busy." "Is she nice?" Evan thought about Victoria Hale, her tired eyes at the birthday party, her unexpected vulnerability in the office, her laugh when he said something that surprised her. "Yeah, she's nice. She just doesn't get to show it very often." That's sad. Sophie finished her last multiplication problem and looked up. Everyone should get to be nice. You're right, Bug. Everyone should. The morning of the board meeting dawned gray and cold, the kind of October day that promised rain without delivering. Evan dropped Sophie at school early, explaining that he had an appointment and would pick her up as usual that afternoon. She hugged him extra tight at the door, as if sensing that something significant was happening, and told him to be brave. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, Bug, more than anything. He arrived at Hale Industries at 9:45, 15 minutes before the meeting was scheduled to start. The security guard at the front desk gave him a visitor's badge and directed him to the executive floor, where Patricia Webb was waiting with an expression that was harder to read than usual. Mr. Brooks, Ms. Hale asked me to show you to the observation room. Observation room? Board meetings are recorded for corporate governance purposes. Family members and approved observers can watch from an adjacent room without being present in the meeting itself. Patricia's voice was professionally neutral. Ms. Hale felt you would be more comfortable there. She led him down a corridor he hadn't seen before, past offices with closed doors and conference rooms with glass walls, to a small room with a window that looked into a much larger space. The boardroom. It was exactly what Evan had expected. A long table of polished wood, leather chairs arranged with geometric precision, screens built into the walls for presentations and video calls. 14 chairs, he counted. 14 people who would soon be deciding whether Victoria Hale's personal choices were acceptable or scandalous. The meeting will begin shortly, Patricia said. Water and coffee are available on the side table. If you need anything else, press the button by the door. She left before he could respond. Evan stood at the window looking into the empty boardroom, feeling like an observer at his own execution. The board members began arriving at 9:55. Evan recognized Harrison Wells immediately, the heavy-set man from Victoria's birthday party, the one who had made comments about legacy and marriage, and the supposed failures of a woman without a husband. He carried himself with the confidence of someone who expected to win, his red face animated as he spoke to colleagues. Others followed. Men in expensive suits, mostly, though Evan counted 3 women among the group. They greeted each other with handshakes and small talk, taking their seats, shuffling papers, checking phones. None of them looked particularly concerned about what was coming. This was routine for them. A meeting, a discussion, nothing that would keep them up at night. Victoria arrived at exactly 10 o'clock. She walked into the boardroom with her head held high, wearing a charcoal suit that made her look both professional and formidable. Her expression was calm, her posture perfect, but Evan could see the tension in her shoulders, the careful control she was maintaining. She took her seat at the head of the table, and for just a moment her eyes flickered toward the observation window. She couldn't see him. The glass was designed for privacy, visible from his side only, but she knew he was there, and that knowledge seemed to steady her. "Good morning, everyone," Victoria said, her voice carrying clearly through the speakers in the observation room. "I understand we have several items on today's agenda. Harrison, I believe you requested time for a special presentation." Harrison Wells smiled, the expression of a man who thought he had already won. "I did, Victoria. Thank you for accommodating the request." "Of course, the floor is yours." Harrison stood, straightening his jacket, taking a moment to survey the room before he began. Evan felt his hands clench into fists at his sides. "Colleagues, I've called this meeting because I have serious concerns about recent developments that could affect the reputation and stability of Hale Industries." Harrison pressed a button, and the wall screens lit up with a photograph of Victoria and Evan leaving Harbor View Restaurant. "For the past 2 months, our CEO has been engaging in a personal relationship with this man, Evan Brooks, a caterer, a single father who works multiple minimum wage jobs, a man who, at Victoria's own birthday party, made an inappropriate comment that many of us witnessed firsthand." The room was silent. Evan stared at the photograph. He hadn't known anyone was taking pictures, hadn't realized they were being watched, and felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Now, I want to be clear," Harrison continued. "I have no objection to Victoria's personal life in principle. What our CEO does in her private time is, generally speaking, her own business. But when that private business begins to affect perceptions of our leadership, when it raises questions about judgment and priorities, when it provides ammunition for competitors and critics who would love to see Hale Industries stumble, that becomes a concern for all of us. He clicked to the next slide. Headlines from tabloid websites. Billionaire CEO dating the help? Victoria Hale's surprising new romance. From catering to courting, the unlikely love story raising eyebrows. This isn't just internal gossip, Harrison said. This is making its way into public discourse. Our shareholders are asking questions. Our partners are expressing concern. And frankly, there are those who wonder whether Victoria's attachment to this man is affecting her ability to lead effectively. That's enough. Victoria's voice cut through the room like a blade. She hadn't stood, hadn't raised her voice, but the authority in her tone was unmistakable. Harrison, you've made your concerns clear. Now let me make something else clear. She stood slowly, deliberately, her eyes never leaving his face. You're right that I've been spending time with Evan Brooks. We've had dinner together several times over the past 2 months. We've talked. We've gotten to know each other, and I have no intention of apologizing for any of it. Victoria, I'm not finished. Her voice hardened. You've presented this as a leadership concern, a reputational risk, an issue of judgment. But let's be honest about what this really is, Harrison. This is about control. This is about your discomfort with the fact that I've chosen to spend my time with someone who doesn't fit your expectations. Someone who isn't rich, isn't powerful, isn't part of the social circles you consider acceptable. It absolutely is. Victoria walked slowly around the table, her gaze sweeping across the board members. For 15 years, I've listened to comments about my personal life, when I'm going to settle down, when I'm going to find someone. Why I haven't given this company an heir, as if Hale Industries is a medieval kingdom that requires bloodline succession. I've smiled through engagement parties for colleagues who judged my choices. I've deflected questions at shareholders' meetings about my marriage prospects as if they had any bearing on my ability to run a company. She stopped beside Harrison's chair, looking down at him with an expression that made him visibly uncomfortable. And now you bring this presentation, these photographs, these tabloid headlines, not because Evan Brooks poses any actual threat to this company, but because his existence in my life challenges your assumptions about who I should be, about what I should want, about what kind of person is worthy of my attention. Victoria, we're simply concerned. You're concerned that I'm happy. The words landed like stones. You're concerned that I found someone who sees me as a person instead of a position. You're concerned that maybe, just maybe, I might prioritize something other than shareholder value for 5 minutes of my life. Evan watched from the observation room, his heart pounding. He had never seen Victoria like this, fierce, unguarded, fighting not for her company, but for her right to be human. Let me tell you about Evan Brooks, Victoria continued, addressing the full board now. He's a single father who works 2 jobs to support his daughter. He was at my birthday party because he was trying to earn enough money to pay for her dental appointment. When Harrison made his comments about my personal life, when everyone in that room looked away or laughed along, Evan was the only person who tried to say something. Yes, what he said was awkward. Yes, it was unexpected, but it came from a place of empathy, not manipulation. She returned to her seat at the head of the table, her composure restored, her authority absolute. I've spent 50 years building this company. I've made decisions that created 30,000 jobs, generated billions in revenue, transformed industries. I have earned the right to have dinner with whoever I choose without justifying myself to anyone. And I will not allow this board to use my personal relationships as leverage against me. The silence that followed was absolute. Harrison Wells sat frozen in his chair, his presentation abandoned, his confident smile replaced by something closer to shock. Now, Victoria said calmly, does anyone have any actual business concerns they'd like to discuss? Or are we finished with the personal attacks for today? One of the board members, a woman Evan didn't recognize, seated near the middle of the table, raised her hand. Victoria, I think I speak for several of us when I say that Harrison's concerns, while perhaps poorly framed, aren't entirely without merit. The media attention is real. The questions from shareholders are real. What would you suggest we do to address them? Ignore them. Victoria's response was immediate. The tabloids will find something else to write about within a week. The shareholders care about quarterly returns, not my dinner companions. And any partner who would question our leadership based on gossip rather than performance isn't a partner worth keeping. But surely nothing. Victoria leaned forward. We have spent decades letting other people's opinions dictate our behavior. We've made decisions based on perception rather than substance. We've avoided risks because someone might disapprove. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of running a company that's afraid of its own shadow. She looked around the table, meeting each board member's eyes in turn. Evan Brooks is a good man. He treats me like a person, not a position. He has never asked me for money, influence, or favors. He makes me laugh. He listens when I talk. And yes, he proposed to me at my birthday party. The most ridiculous, unexpected, honest thing anyone has ever said to me. A small smile crossed her face. If that's the scandal this board wants to focus on, then perhaps this board needs to examine its priorities. Harrison Wells finally found his voice. Victoria, you can't expect us to simply ignore... I can expect whatever I want, Harrison. I'm the CEO. Victoria's smile sharpened. And while we're discussing expectations, let me be clear about something else. If I hear any more rumors about Evan using his daughter to manipulate me, any more suggestions that a 6-year-old child is somehow part of a scheme to access my resources, I will personally ensure that the source of those rumors faces consequences, professional and legal. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. His daughter's name is Sophie, Victoria continued. She likes dinosaurs and chocolate chip cookies and asking questions that adults don't know how to answer. She is 6 years old, and anyone who drags a child into corporate politics to attack her father should be ashamed of themselves. Harrison said nothing. Several board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Now, Victoria said, her tone returning to professional neutrality, shall we move on to the quarterly projections, or does anyone else have personal attacks they'd like to get out of the way first? The rest of the meeting proceeded without incident. The board reviewed financial reports, discussed upcoming acquisitions, approved budgets for the following quarter. No one mentioned Evan Brooks again. No one dared. Evan stayed in the observation room through it all, watching Victoria navigate the discussion with the same precision she had used to defend him. She was brilliant, he realized. Not just successful, but genuinely remarkably brilliant, switching between technical details and strategic vision, challenging assumptions, demanding better answers. This was who she was when she wasn't being diminished or judged. This was the Victoria Hale that the world rarely got to see. When the meeting finally ended, the board members filed out with varying degrees of chastened silence. Harrison Wells left quickly, avoiding Victoria's gaze, his presentation slide still glowing uselessly on the screens. Victoria stayed behind, gathering her papers, waiting until the room was empty. Then she walked to the observation window and pressed her palm against the glass. Evan did the same from his side, their hands separated by inches of transparent barrier, connected by something that felt increasingly real. Patricia Webb appeared at his door moments later. Ms. Hale would like to see you in her office. He found her standing at the window again, looking out at the city, her shoulders finally relaxed. She turned when he entered, and he saw that her eyes were bright with something that might have been tears or might have been triumph. You were incredible, he said. I was angry. Victoria laughed softly. Anger can be useful sometimes, makes you say things you've been holding back for decades. Everything you said, about me, about Sophie, I meant every word. She crossed the room toward him. You're a good man, Evan Brooks. You deserve to have someone say that publicly, not just privately. You defended a 6-year-old who's never even met you. She's important to you. That makes her important to me. Victoria stopped a few feet away, close enough to touch, but not touching. I've never had children. Never wanted them, I thought. But hearing Harrison imply that your daughter was some kind of manipulation tool, I've never felt that kind of anger before. That protective fury. Welcome to parenthood. Victoria laughed again, and this time the sound was easier, lighter. I suppose so. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the morning settling around them. Evan thought about everything he had witnessed, the attack, the defense, the fierce humanity Victoria had revealed in front of people who had probably never seen her as anything but a corporate machine. What happens now? He asked. Now? Harrison will probably avoid me for a few weeks. The board will pretend none of this happened. The tabloids will move on to someone else's scandal. Victoria shrugged. Life continues. And us? The question hung between them, heavy with meaning neither of them had addressed directly. Victoria looked at him, really looked, and Evan saw something in her expression that made his breath catch. I don't know what we are, she said honestly. I've never done this before. Chosen someone because they made me feel seen instead of because they fit some strategic requirement. I don't have a playbook for it. Neither do I. My last relationship ended because I wasn't ambitious enough, because I wanted to be present for my daughter instead of climbing corporate ladders. Evan took a step closer. I'm not good at this, Victoria. I'm tired and broke, and I work 2 jobs, and I have a child who depends on me for everything. I'm not the kind of person who usually ends up with someone like you. And I'm a 50-year-old CEO who has spent her entire adult life being managed and positioned and optimized. I don't know how to have a relationship that isn't a transaction. Victoria's voice softened. We're both terrible at this. So maybe we figure it out together, badly, awkwardly, with no playbook and no strategy. That sounds terrifying. It does. Evan smiled. Also kind of wonderful? Victoria reached out and took his hand. The gesture was simple, almost ordinary, but Evan felt something shift between them, some final barrier falling, some last resistance giving way. I'd like to meet Sophie, Victoria said. Properly. Not as the CEO of Hale Industries, but as someone who matters to you. She'd like that. She asked about you, actually. Wanted to know if you were nice. What did you tell her? That you are. You just don't always get to show it. Victoria squeezed his hand. Then maybe it's time I started showing it more. They left her office together, walking past Patricia Webb's desk, past the expensive artwork and the corporate elegance, toward the elevators that would carry them back to the ordinary world. Harrison Wells was nowhere to be seen. The battle was over, at least for now. But as they stepped into the elevator, as the doors closed and they began their descent from the executive heights to the ground floor, Evan couldn't shake the feeling that something larger was beginning. Something neither of them had planned for. Something real. The Sunday after the board meeting dawned clear and bright, the kind of autumn day that felt like a gift after weeks of gray skies. Evan woke early, made pancakes with Sophie, and tried to explain that someone special was coming to visit without making it sound too momentous. Is it your friend? Sophie asked, syrup dripping down her chin. The nice one who might be in trouble? The same one. Her name is Victoria. That's a pretty name. Sophie considered this while chewing. Is she still in trouble? Not anymore. She handled it herself. Good. I don't like when people are in trouble. Sophie finished her pancake and looked up at him with serious eyes. Daddy, is Victoria your girlfriend? The question caught Evan off guard. He had been so focused on the dinner conversations, the board meeting, the slow development of whatever was growing between him and Victoria that he hadn't considered how to explain it to his daughter. I don't know yet, Bug. We're still figuring that out. How do you figure out if someone's your girlfriend? That's a very good question. Evan wiped syrup from her face with a napkin. I think you spend time together. You talk about things that matter. You see if being with them makes you feel happy and safe. Does Victoria make you feel happy and safe? Evan thought about the question, really thought about it, and realized the answer was yes. Despite the complications, despite the vast differences in their circumstances, despite everything that should have made their connection impossible, Victoria Hale made him feel seen, and being seen after years of feeling invisible was its own kind of safety. Yeah, Bug, she does. Then I think she's your girlfriend. Sophie nodded decisively, as if the matter were settled. Can I show her my dinosaur books? You can show her whatever you want. Victoria arrived at 11, driving herself for the first time in Evan's experience. The car was still expensive, some kind of sleek sedan that probably cost more than his apartment, but seeing her behind the wheel instead of being chauffeured felt significant somehow. More human. She parked on the street and walked up to the building entrance, where Evan was waiting. She was dressed more casually than he had ever seen her. Dark jeans, a cream-colored sweater, boots that looked expensive but practical. Her hair was down, slightly windswept from the walk. This is strange, she admitted, stopping a few feet away. I've given presentations to world leaders. I've negotiated billion-dollar deals. But meeting a 6-year-old genuinely terrifies me. She's not that scary. She'll probably just want to show you dinosaur books. I don't know anything about dinosaurs. Neither do I. We learned together. Evan smiled and offered his hand. Come on. She's been asking about you since breakfast. They climbed the stairs to his apartment. No elevator in this building. One of many details that reminded Evan of the gulf between their lives, and he felt acutely aware of everything Victoria was seeing: the worn carpet in the hallways, the fluorescent lighting that buzzed slightly, the smell of someone's cooking drifting from behind a closed door. It's not much, he said as they reached his floor. But it's home. It's yours. That's what matters. He opened the door, and Sophie was waiting in the living room, her dinosaur book already clutched in her hands. She had changed clothes 3 times that morning, finally settling on her favorite dress, the one with the purple flowers that she usually saved for special occasions. Hi, Sophie said, suddenly shy. Are you Victoria? Victoria crouched down to Sophie's level, bringing them eye to eye. I am, and you must be Sophie. Your dad has told me a lot about you. He told me about you too. Sophie studied Victoria with the frank curiosity of childhood. You have pretty hair. It's like silver, like a unicorn. Thank you. That's the nicest thing anyone has ever said about my hair. Do you like dinosaurs? I don't know very much about them, but I'd love to learn. Sophie's face lit up. I can teach you. I have books with all the different kinds. Do you know what a Parasaurolophus is? No, what is it? It's a dinosaur with a big crest on its head, like a horn but curved. Scientists think they used it to make sounds, like a trumpet. Sophie grabbed Victoria's hand without hesitation, pulling her toward the couch. Come on, I'll show you the pictures. Evan watched them settle onto the worn cushions, Sophie already flipping through her book, Victoria listening with what appeared to be genuine interest. The sight of them together, his daughter and this woman who had become unexpectedly important to him, created a feeling in his chest that he couldn't quite name. He went to the kitchen to make coffee, giving them space, and listened to fragments of their conversation through the doorway. This one's a Stegosaurus. See the plates on its back? They weren't for fighting, they were for temperature control, like solar panels. That's fascinating. How do scientists know that? They study the bones. Paleontologists, they're called. I want to be one when I grow up. Or maybe a librarian. I haven't decided yet. Those are both excellent choices. Do you like reading? I love reading. Daddy takes me to the library every Saturday. We get 5 books each, and then we read them during the week, and then we take them back and get new ones. What's your favorite book right now? The one about the girl who finds a dragon egg and has to protect it from the people who want to use it for bad things. The dragon's name is Ember, and she breathes blue fire instead of orange. Evan returned with coffee, 2 mugs plus apple juice for Sophie, and found them huddled together over the dinosaur book, heads bent close, pointing at pictures and talking about creatures that had been extinct for millions of years. Victoria caught his eye and smiled, and there was something in that smile he hadn't seen before. Softness. Wonder. The expression of someone discovering something they hadn't known they were missing. The afternoon unfolded with easy warmth. They had lunch together, grilled cheese sandwiches because that was Sophie's favorite, and Victoria ate hers without comment, as if $1,000 dinners and humble kitchen tables were equally normal. After lunch, Sophie wanted to show Victoria her room, which led to explanations of every stuffed animal, every drawing taped to the wall, every treasure that mattered in a 6-year-old's world. This is Mr. Buttons. He's a bear. Daddy gave him to me when I was a baby, so he's very old. And this is Rainbow. She's a unicorn. And this is Captain Scales. He's a dragon, but a friendly one. Victoria examined each treasure with appropriate seriousness. They're beautiful. You take very good care of them. Daddy says taking care of things is how you show you love them, even things that aren't alive, because the caring is what matters. Victoria glanced at Evan, who was leaning in the doorway, watching the scene with something like awe. Your daddy is very wise, she said quietly. I know, he's the best daddy in the whole world. By late afternoon, Sophie was starting to fade, the excitement of the day catching up with her. She fell asleep on the couch with her head in Victoria's lap, Mr. Buttons clutched to her chest, while Evan and Victoria talked in low voices about nothing in particular. She's wonderful, Victoria said, her fingers gently stroking Sophie's hair. You've done an incredible job with her. I've done my best. Some days I feel like it's not enough. It's more than enough. She's kind, curious, confident. She knows she's loved. Victoria's voice caught slightly. That's everything, Evan. That's everything that matters. What about you? Did you know you were loved growing up? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. My parents loved me in their way, but it was always conditional. Achieve this. Accomplish that. Be worthy of the Hale name. I never felt like I was enough, just as myself. I always had to be working toward something, proving something, earning my place. That sounds exhausting. It was. It is. She looked down at Sophie's sleeping face. I wonder sometimes what I would have been like if someone had just let me be a child. Let me play and dream and learn about dinosaurs without worrying about whether it was productive. It's not too late. To be a child? To be yourself without the performance. Evan moved closer, settling onto the couch beside them. You don't have to earn anything here. You can just be. Victoria met his eyes, and he saw something vulnerable there, something raw. I don't know how to do that. I've been performing so long, I'm not sure who I am underneath. Then we figure it out. Together. Badly and awkwardly, remember? She laughed softly, careful not to wake Sophie. I remember. They sat in comfortable silence while the afternoon light shifted through the windows, painting the small apartment in shades of gold. Evan thought about how strange the situation was. A billionaire CEO sitting on his second-hand couch, his daughter asleep in her lap, both of them pretending this was normal. But somehow, impossibly, it felt normal. It felt right. Eventually, Sophie woke, groggy and confused, and Victoria helped her sit up while Evan made hot chocolate, the instant kind from packets, because that was what they had. Are you going to stay for dinner? Sophie asked Victoria, rubbing her eyes. I should probably let you and your daddy have your evening, but I'd love to come back another time if that's okay. Yes, please. Sophie nodded seriously. And next time I'll show you my bug collection. I have a beetle that's blue and green and shiny. I can't wait. Evan walked Victoria to the door while Sophie started setting out her art supplies for post-dinner coloring time. They stood in the hallway, neither quite ready to say goodbye. Thank you for today, Victoria said. I can't remember the last time I spent an afternoon just being somewhere, without an agenda or a schedule or something I was supposed to accomplish. You accomplished a lot. Sophie has declared you officially cool, which is her highest honor. I'm honored. Victoria paused, seeming to gather herself. Evan, I want to show you something. My home, I mean. Not the penthouse where I host business dinners. My real home. You have two homes? The penthouse is for work, for maintaining the image everyone expects. But I have a house outside the city where I actually live when I'm not performing. She hesitated. I've never shown it to anyone. Not Richard, not colleagues, not anyone. It's the one place that's just mine. And you want to show it to me? I want to show it to both of you, if you're interested. Evan thought about what that meant. Victoria opening up her private space, the place she had kept separate from the demands of her public life. The trust that represented. The vulnerability. We're interested, he said. Very interested. They made plans for the following weekend. Victoria left, and Evan returned to find Sophie carefully coloring a picture of what appeared to be a woman with silver hair standing next to a small girl and a man. Who's that? He asked, sitting beside her. That's us. You, me, and Victoria. Sophie added purple flowers around the figures. She's nice, Daddy. I think she should come back a lot. I think she will, Bug. Good. Sophie returned to her coloring, tongue poking out in concentration. I like when people come back. It means they really like us. The week passed quickly, filled with the ordinary rhythms of work and school and homework and bedtime stories. But underneath the routine, Evan felt something building. Anticipation, maybe, or hope. He and Victoria texted throughout the week, short messages about nothing and everything, the kind of mundane communication that somehow felt significant. How was your day? Sophie asked about Parasaurolophus again. I had to look up how to pronounce it. Board meeting was boring, Wished I was learning about dinosaurs instead. She wants to show you her bug collection. Fair warning, it's extensive. I've faced scarier things than beetles. Probably. Saturday arrived gray and cold, threatening rain that never quite materialized. Victoria picked them up at 9 in the morning, and Sophie spent the first 20 minutes of the drive asking questions about the car, the dashboard buttons, and whether Victoria had ever driven really fast like in the movies. Once or twice, Victoria admitted, but only on tracks designed for it. Safety first. That's what Daddy says. Safety first, adventure second. Your daddy is very sensible. They drove north out of the city, through suburbs that gradually gave way to countryside, past farms and forests and small towns that looked like postcards from another era. Sophie watched everything with wide eyes, commenting on cows and horses and old barns and anything else that caught her attention. After about an hour, Victoria turned onto a private road that wound through dense woods before opening up to reveal a house that stopped Evan's breath in his chest. It wasn't what he expected. After the corporate offices and the expensive restaurants and the sleek sedan, he had imagined something grand, a mansion maybe, or an estate designed to impress. But Victoria's real home was modest. A craftsman cottage painted soft gray with white trim, surrounded by gardens that looked wild and intentional at the same time. A wraparound porch with rocking chairs. A tire swing hanging from an old oak tree. "This is where you live?" Sophie asked, clearly as surprised as Evan. "This is where I actually live, when I can." Victoria parked in front of the house and turned to face them. "I bought it 15 years ago when I first became CEO. I needed somewhere that was just mine, somewhere the job couldn't follow me." "It's beautiful," Evan said. "It's home." Victoria smiled, and there was something different in her expression. Softer, younger, less guarded. "Come inside, I want to show you everything." The interior matched the exterior, warm and comfortable rather than impressive. Wooden floors worn smooth by years of footsteps, bookshelves crammed with titles that ranged from business texts to romance novels to children's books that Victoria admitted she had bought for herself, just because she liked them. A kitchen with a big wooden table and mismatched chairs. Photographs on every surface. Some formal, most candid, many featuring people Evan didn't recognize, but whose importance was clear from their placement. "This was my grandmother," Victoria said, picking up a silver-framed picture of an older woman with Victoria's eyes. "She raised me more than my parents did. She's the one who taught me that success means nothing if you lose yourself along the way." She set the picture down gently. "I think she would have liked you." Sophie had already discovered the French doors leading to the back garden and was pressing her face against the glass. "Daddy, there's a tire swing. Can I go play on it?" "Ask Victoria." "Victoria, can I please play on the tire swing?" "Of course, just be careful. The rope is old, so don't swing too hard." Sophie was through the doors before Victoria finished the sentence, racing across the lawn with the unbridled enthusiasm of childhood. Evan and Victoria watched her through the glass as she discovered the swing, the garden, the small pond with goldfish that became immediately fascinating. "I've never had anyone here," Victoria said quietly. "I told you that, but I want you to understand what it means. This place has been my sanctuary for 15 years. The one space where I could be Victoria instead of Miss Hale. The one place where no one expected anything from me." "Why are you showing it to us?" Victoria turned to face him. "Because when I think about what I want my future to look like, this is where I picture it. This house, this garden, these rooms. And somewhere along the way, I started picturing you and Sophie here too." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Evan felt his heart rate increase, felt the weight of what Victoria was saying and what it meant for both of them. "Victoria, I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other a few months. I know everything about our situation is complicated and impractical and probably impossible by any reasonable measure." Victoria's voice was steady, but he could see her hands trembling slightly. "But I've spent 50 years making reasonable decisions, strategic decisions, decisions that looked good on paper but left me empty inside. I don't want to do that anymore." "What do you want?" "I want this. I want lazy Saturdays and dinosaur books and tire swings and coffee at kitchen tables. I want to know what it feels like to be chosen because someone actually wants me, not because I'm useful or strategic or appropriate. She reached out, took his hand. I want you, Evan, both of you. Not because you fit some plan, but because being with you is the first time in decades that I've felt like myself. Evan looked at her, this woman who had built empires and defended him against boards and learned about dinosaurs because his daughter wanted to teach her, and felt something shift in his chest, something that had been guarded for years, protected behind walls of exhaustion and disappointment and the constant struggle to survive, finally beginning to open. That day at your birthday party, he said slowly, when I said marry me, I didn't mean it. It was just words, thoughtless, careless words that I regretted the moment they left my mouth. Victoria's face flickered, something like hurt passing through her expression. But now? Evan stepped closer, still holding her hand. Now, if I said those words, I would mean them. Every single one. Evan, I'm not proposing. Not yet. We're not there yet, and I know that. But I want you to know that the feeling is real. Whatever this is between us, it's real for me. Not a strategy or a transaction or a way to improve my circumstances. Just real. Victoria exhaled, a sound that was almost a laugh and almost a sob. That might be the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me. The bar is apparently very low. The bar is subterranean. She laughed for real this time, the sound light and free in a way Evan had never heard before. But that's okay. We'll set a new one. Together. Through the glass doors, they could see Sophie discovering the goldfish pond, crouching at its edge and probably conducting a detailed interview with each fish about their preferences and opinions. The sight was so ordinary, so perfect, that Evan felt tears prick at his eyes. She loves it here already, he said. Good. Because I want this to be her home too. Eventually, if that's what you both want. Let's take it slow, figure it out as we go. Badly and awkwardly? Badly and awkwardly, the only way we know how. They joined Sophie in the garden, where she had already named all 6 goldfish and was explaining their personality differences to anyone who would listen. Victoria introduced her to the herb garden, basil, rosemary, thyme, things Sophie had never seen growing before, and showed her how to pick leaves and crush them between her fingers to release the scent. You can take some home if you want. Plant them in pots on your windowsill. Really? Our own herbs? Our own herbs? Victoria smiled at the word our, and Evan saw the same wonder in her expression that he felt in his chest. They spent the whole day at the cottage. Victoria made lunch, pasta with fresh tomatoes from her garden, the last of the season's harvest, and Sophie helped by stirring the sauce and tasting everything multiple times to ensure quality. After lunch, they explored the property together, finding the old stone wall where Victoria had hidden treasures as a younger woman, the tree she had climbed when she needed to think, the small greenhouse where she grew orchids through the winter. This is where I come when everything feels like too much, Victoria said, standing in the greenhouse surrounded by delicate blooms. Something about caring for things that need patience. It reminds me that not everything has to happen immediately. Some things are worth waiting for. Evan watched Sophie examine the orchids with careful fingers, asking questions about their names and their needs, and thought about everything he had been waiting for without knowing it. Stability that felt like home rather than survival, connection that went deeper than exhaustion allowed, someone who saw him and chose him anyway. Maybe some things were worth waiting for. Maybe he had finally found them. They drove back to the city as the sun began to set, Sophie asleep in the back seat with a container of fresh herbs on her lap and dirt under her fingernails. Victoria's hand found Evan's on the center console, their fingers intertwining without conscious thought. Thank you for today, Evan said, for showing us that part of yourself. Thank you for being the kind of person I wanted to show it to. Victoria glanced at him, her eyes soft in the fading light. I meant what I said earlier, about wanting this to be real, about wanting you. I meant what I said too. The feeling is real. So what happens now? Evan thought about the question, the uncertainty it contained, the hope beneath the surface. They were both damaged people, scarred by disappointments and betrayals, and years of building walls against more pain. They were both taking a risk that might not work out. They were both choosing something that didn't fit any conventional definition of sensible. But maybe that was exactly the point, Maybe the most important choices were the ones that didn't make sense on paper. Maybe real love, whatever that was, required exactly this kind of leap. Now we take the next step, he said, and then the one after that. We figure it out as we go, remember? Badly and awkwardly. Always. Victoria squeezed his hand and they drove through the darkening evening toward home, toward whatever version of home they were building together, one awkward, beautiful step at a time. Sophie woke as they reached the city, groggy but happy, clutching her herbs and talking about the goldfish she was going to visit again soon. Victoria walked them to their apartment building, hugged Sophie goodnight, and lingered at the entrance like she wasn't quite ready to let go of the day. Same time next week? Evan asked. If you'll have me. Victoria, you're always welcome, you know that. She kissed him then, soft and certain and full of promise, while Sophie giggled and covered her eyes and announced that kissing was gross, but also kind of nice. It was messy and imperfect and exactly right. After Victoria left, Evan carried Sophie upstairs and helped her get ready for bed. She was still talking about the cottage, the herbs, the goldfish, the greenhouse with the orchids. Daddy? Yeah, Bug? I like Victoria a lot. I like her too. Is she going to be part of our family? Evan tucked the blankets around her, considering the question. I don't know yet. We're still figuring that out. But you want her to be? Yeah, Bug. I think I do. Sophie nodded sleepily, satisfied with the answer. Good. Because she looks at you the way you look at me, like you're the most important person in the world. Evan stayed beside her bed until she fell asleep, his heart full in a way he hadn't felt in years. Then he went to the window, looked out at the city lights stretching toward the horizon, and let himself imagine a future he had never thought possible. A family, a home, a love that was real instead of strategic. Maybe this was what it felt like when broken pieces finally started coming together. The months that followed wove themselves into a rhythm that Evan hadn't known he was missing until it arrived. Saturdays at the cottage became tradition, then Sundays too, until the gray craftsman house outside the city felt less like Victoria's sanctuary and more like their shared secret garden. Sophie learned to tend the herbs on their apartment windowsill, reporting daily on their progress with the seriousness of a scientist conducting critical research. Victoria learned to make grilled cheese sandwiches without burning them, a skill she celebrated with genuine pride the first time she succeeded. They took things slowly, deliberately, both of them aware that what they were building was fragile and precious and worth protecting from the rush that had destroyed so many things in both their lives. Evan continued working at the cafe, though Victoria had offered, gently, without pressure, to help with finances. He declined, not from pride but from something deeper, a need to bring something of his own to this relationship beyond need. Victoria understood without him having to explain, which was perhaps the clearest sign that what they had was real. Winter settled over the city with its usual combination of cold and celebration. Sophie's school held a holiday concert where she sang slightly off-key with complete confidence, and Victoria sat in the audience beside Evan, her expensive coat brushing against his second-hand one, both of them beaming like proud parents. The other parents whispered, of course they did. Victoria Hale attending an elementary school concert was the kind of thing people noticed. But neither Evan nor Victoria paid attention. She has your fearlessness, Victoria said afterward, as Sophie ran toward them with a paper snowflake she had made in art class. She has her own fearlessness. I just try not to get in its way. Christmas approached with all its attendant chaos. Evan had always made the holiday special for Sophie despite limited resources. A small tree, carefully chosen gifts, cookies baked together, the same traditions his own mother had maintained when he was young. But this year, Victoria wanted to be part of it. I haven't celebrated Christmas in years, she admitted one evening at the cottage while Sophie was exploring the greenhouse and they had a rare moment alone. Not really. Corporate parties don't count. Gift exchanges with colleagues who don't actually know you don't count. I've forgotten what it feels like to celebrate something because it matters, not because it's expected. Then come celebrate with us. Nothing fancy, just dinner and presents and probably too many sugar cookies because Sophie doesn't believe in moderation. I'd like that. Victoria paused, something uncertain flickering in her expression. I have a gift for her, for Sophie. I wasn't sure if it was too much, too soon, but what is it? A microscope. A real one, not a toy. She keeps talking about wanting to look at bug wings up close, and I thought. Victoria trailed off. Is it too much? Evan thought about his daughter's face when she examined leaves and insects and anything else that caught her attention. He thought about her questions, endless, curious, hungry for understanding. He thought about what it meant that Victoria had listened closely enough to know exactly what Sophie would love. It's perfect, he said. She's going to lose her mind. Christmas morning arrived cold and bright. Victoria came over early, before Sophie was awake, and helped Evan arrange presents under their modest tree. She had brought a bag that seemed too large, filled with carefully wrapped packages that she distributed with obvious nervousness. I might have gone overboard, she admitted. I've never bought presents for a child before. I didn't know where to stop. Victoria, you could have brought her a stick and she would have been happy because it came from you. I considered a stick. It seemed insufficiently festive. Sophie woke to find them both waiting, and her shriek of excitement at seeing Victoria there echoed through the small apartment. She tore through presents with gleeful abandon, books about dinosaurs and bugs and ocean creatures, art supplies in every color, a set of gardening tools sized for small hands. But the microscope stopped her completely. She stared at it for a long moment, her small hands trembling slightly as she touched the metal casing. Is this real? She whispered. Completely real, Victoria said. Now you can look at all those bug wings up close, just like you wanted. Sophie launched herself at Victoria with enough force to nearly knock her over, wrapping her arms around Victoria's neck and holding on like she would never let go. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is the best present ever. You're the best person ever. Victoria's eyes met Evan's over Sophie's head, bright with unshed tears. Merry Christmas, sweetheart. Merry Christmas, Victoria. Sophie pulled back, her face serious. I have a present for you, too. Daddy helped me make it. She retrieved a small package from under the tree. Wrapped in paper, she had decorated herself with drawings of flowers and stars and what might have been goldfish. Victoria opened it carefully, as if it were something precious, and found a handmade ornament inside. A clay heart painted purple, with the words Victoria plus Sophie plus Daddy equals family scratched into the surface. Victoria stared at it for a long moment without speaking. When she finally looked up, tears were streaming down her face. Sophie, this is beautiful. I made it at school. Mrs. Patterson helped me with the letters. Do you like it? I love it. I love it so much. Victoria pulled Sophie into another hug, her voice thick. This is the best present anyone has ever given me. They spent the day together, the three of them, eating too many cookies and watching Sophie examine everything under her new microscope and playing board games that Victoria lost with spectacular grace. It felt like every Christmas Evan had ever wanted, not perfect in some idealized way, but perfect in its realness, its warmth, its sense of belonging. That night, after Sophie had finally surrendered to exhaustion, Evan and Victoria sat together on his small couch, the tree lights casting soft colors across the room. Sophie's handmade ornament hung in the center of the tree, visible from everywhere in the apartment. She called us a family, Victoria said quietly. She did. Is that what we are? Evan considered the question. 6 months ago, family had meant him and Sophie against the world, two people building something from the wreckage of his failed marriage. Now it meant something different, something larger. I think that's what we're becoming, he said. If you want it. I want it, Victoria's voice was certain. I want it more than I've ever wanted anything, which terrifies me, honestly. I'm not used to wanting things that aren't related to business outcomes. Terrifying is okay. Terrifying means it matters. Does it terrify you? Evan thought about all the ways this could go wrong, the differences in their circumstances, the complications of public perception, the challenges of blending lives that had been built on such different foundations. Then he thought about Sophie's face when she opened the microscope. Victoria's tears over a clay heart. The way this woman had fought for him in front of her board, defended his daughter without ever meeting her, opened her sanctuary to people she barely knew because something in her recognized something in them. Yeah, he admitted, but not enough to stop. Victoria leaned into him, her head on his shoulder, her hand finding his. Good. Because I don't think I could stop now, even if I wanted to. The new year arrived with new rhythms, new routines, new ways of being together. Victoria started spending more nights at the cottage, and Evan and Sophie often joined her. Weekends at first, then occasional weeknights, until the question of where they lived became pleasantly complicated. Sophie started calling the cottage our other house, and neither Evan nor Victoria corrected her. At work, things had settled. The tabloid interest faded as predicted, replaced by newer scandals and more interesting gossip. Harrison Wells maintained a professional distance from Victoria, their interactions limited to necessary business communication. The board had moved on to other concerns, and Victoria's authority remained intact, perhaps even strengthened by her willingness to defend it. Evan found new work, leaving the cafe for a position at a small publishing company that Victoria had nothing to do with. He had been clear about that, wanting to earn his own way, and she had respected his wishes without argument. The hours were better, the pay was better, and the work felt meaningful in a way that pouring coffee never had. He came home at reasonable times, spent evenings with Sophie and Victoria, felt for the first time in years like he was building something rather than just surviving. Spring arrived slowly, reluctantly, as if the winter was unwilling to release its grip. But eventually the gray skies gave way to blue, the bare trees budded with new green, and Victoria's garden at the cottage began to wake from its dormancy. Sophie helped plant new herbs, new vegetables, new flowers, her small hands covered in dirt, her face bright with concentration. One evening in late April, after Sophie had gone to bed in the room at the cottage that had gradually become hers, Evan and Victoria sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. "I've been thinking," Victoria said. "About?" "About what you said. At Christmas, when we talked about what we're becoming." She turned to face him, her expression serious. "I know we agreed to take things slowly, to figure it out as we go. And I don't want to rush anything, but I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." Evan's heart rate increased. "Okay. That day at my birthday party, when you said marry me, you told me later that you didn't mean it then, but that if you said it now, you would mean it." Victoria paused, gathering herself. "Is that still true? Do you still mean it?" The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Evan looked at this woman, this brilliant, complicated, unexpectedly vulnerable woman who had become essential to his life in ways he still didn't fully understand, and felt something settle in his chest. Certainty, clarity. "Yes," he said, "I still mean it." Victoria exhaled slowly. "Then I need to tell you something. I need you to know exactly what you're getting into before you say anything else." "Victoria, I know who you are. I know your life is complicated. I know you know parts of it. But there are things I haven't told you, things I've been afraid to say because I didn't want to scare you away." She stood, began pacing the porch, her agitation visible. "My life isn't just complicated. It's public. Every decision I make gets analyzed by shareholders and journalists and competitors looking for weakness. If we get married, when we get married, your life becomes public too. Sophie's life becomes public. You'll be scrutinized in ways you can't imagine. People will write articles about you, investigate your background, photograph you without permission. I've shielded you from most of it so far, but I won't be able to forever." "I know." "And then there's the money. I'm worth more than most people can comprehend, and that creates problems you might not anticipate. People will assume you married me for financial reasons. They'll never stop assuming that, no matter what you do or say. Your own family, your friends, strangers on the street, everyone will have opinions about why you're with me. It will wear on you. It wears on everyone." "Victoria, and I'm 50 years old. I have maybe 30 years left if I'm lucky. Probably fewer given my work habits. You're 34. You'll spend the last decades of your life alone if you choose me. You'll be a widower at 60, maybe 70. Have you thought about that? Have you really thought about what you're giving up?" She was crying now, Evan realized. Victoria Hale, who commanded boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals without flinching, was crying on her porch because she was afraid of losing him. He stood, crossed to her, took her hands in his. "Victoria, look at me." She did, reluctantly, her eyes red and uncertain. I know your life is public. I've known that since the beginning. I've seen the articles, felt the scrutiny, understood what it means to be connected to someone like you. It doesn't change anything. But I know about the money. I know people will make assumptions. I've been making minimum wage for 5 years. I'm familiar with people underestimating me based on my circumstances. Their opinions don't define me. They never have. And the age difference? The fact that you'll outlive me? Victoria, I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. Sophie could. He stopped, unable to voice the fear. We don't get guarantees. Nobody does. All we get is the time we have and the choices we make with it. And I choose you. I choose whatever years we get, however many or few. I choose the complications and the scrutiny and the assumptions. I choose all of it because all of it comes with you. Victoria stared at him, tears still falling, something like wonder breaking through the fear. You really mean that? I really mean that. Even knowing everything? Even understanding what you're getting into? Even knowing everything. Evan pulled her closer. Victoria, I fell in love with you over dinosaur books and grilled cheese sandwiches. I fell in love with you while you learned to plant herbs and name goldfish and lose at board games with dignity. I fell in love with the woman underneath the CEO, the person you showed me when you stopped performing. I don't care about the complications. I care about you. I love you too. The words came out broken, almost surprised, as if she hadn't quite let herself say them before. I love you so much it terrifies me. I've never felt anything like this. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I. But we'll figure it out, badly and awkwardly. Remember? Badly and awkwardly. She laughed through her tears. Our specialty. Evan held her until the tears subsided, until her breathing steadied, until the last light faded from the sky and the stars began to emerge. They stood together on the porch of the house that had become their home, surrounded by the garden they had planted together, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it as a team. So, Victoria said finally, pulling back to look at him. What happens now? Now I need to do something I should have done months ago. What? Evan dropped to one knee. Victoria's breath caught. Evan, Victoria Hale. 6 months ago, I accidentally proposed to you at a party because I was tired and you looked lonely and I wasn't thinking. It was careless and stupid and the most important mistake I've ever made. He looked up at her, this woman who had changed everything. Now I'm proposing to you on purpose, with full awareness of who you are and what it means and what we're getting into. I don't have a ring. I'll get one, I promise. But I have intention. I have commitment. I have a 6-year-old who already calls you family and a heart that has been yours since you didn't have me arrested for being ridiculous. Victoria laughed, tears starting again. Marry me. Not because it makes sense on paper, or because anyone expects it, or because of anything except this. I love you. I choose you. I want to build a life with you, however complicated, however challenging, however imperfect. Will you marry me? For a long moment, Victoria didn't speak. She looked at him, really looked, the way she had the first time they met in her office, seen through the surface to something real underneath. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll marry you. She pulled him to his feet and kissed him, and somewhere inside the house, Sophie appeared at her window, woken by some instinct children have for knowing when important things are happening. She saw them embracing on the porch and let out a shriek loud enough to wake the goldfish in the pond. Daddy, Victoria, are you getting married? They broke apart laughing, both of them wiping tears from their faces, turning to wave at the excited face in the window. Yes, Bug, we're getting married. I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. Sophie disappeared from the window and reappeared seconds later on the porch, launching herself at both of them with enough force to nearly knock them over. They caught her together, the three of them tangled in an embrace that felt like everything Evan had ever wanted. Does this mean Victoria's my mom now? Sophie asked, her voice muffled against Victoria's shoulder. Victoria looked at Evan, uncertain, not wanting to overstep. That's up to Victoria, Evan said gently, and up to you. But if you both want it, I want it, Sophie said immediately. I want Victoria to be my mom. She's already my family. The ornament says so. Victoria's face crumpled. Sophie, I would be honored to be your mom. If you'll have me, I'll have you. Sophie pulled back, her face serious with 6-year-old gravity. But you have to promise to keep learning about dinosaurs. Moms have to know about dinosaurs. It's a rule. I promise. I'll learn about every dinosaur there is. Even the ones with the unpronounceable names? Especially those ones. They stayed on the porch for a long time, the three of them, watching the stars and making plans and imagining futures that had seemed impossible just months before. Eventually, Sophie fell asleep in Victoria's arms, and they carried her inside together, tucked her into her bed in her room at the cottage, kissed her forehead, and whispered goodnight. We're really doing this, Victoria said as they stood in the doorway watching Sophie sleep. We're really doing this. It won't be easy. Nothing worth having ever is. But we'll figure it out. Together, badly and awkwardly. Our specialty. They held hands as they walked to their own room, their footsteps quiet on the floors of the house that had become their home. Tomorrow there would be calls to make, arrangements to consider, complications to navigate. Tomorrow, the real work of building a life together would begin. But tonight, there was only this. Two people who had found each other against all odds, choosing each other deliberately, building something real from the wreckage of loneliness and the foundation of hope. The wedding happened 3 months later, on a perfect July afternoon, in the garden of the cottage where their love had grown. Sophie served as flower girl, scattering petals from Victoria's own flower beds along the path they had created. Mrs. Patterson attended, crying happy tears. Marcus came, still incredulous that his friend had somehow ended up with a billionaire. Patricia Webb organized everything with her usual efficiency, though Evan caught her wiping her eyes more than once. There were no executives, no board members, no society matrons or business partners, just the people who mattered, just family. Victoria wore a simple white dress, nothing like the designer gown she donned for corporate events. Evan wore a suit that actually fit, purchased for this occasion, the first new suit he had owned in years. They wrote their own vows, speaking them to each other in voices that trembled with emotion. I vow to see you, Victoria said. Not your circumstances, not your background, not what you can do for me, just you. The man who made a ridiculous joke at my birthday party and somehow saw me more clearly than anyone had in decades. I vow to be the person you deserve, even when I fall short. I vow to keep learning about dinosaurs. Sophie giggled from her position beside them. I vow to show up, Evan said. Every day, in ways big and small. I vow to choose you, not once, but constantly. Every morning when I wake, and every night before I sleep. I vow to build a life with you that's real instead of impressive, meaningful instead of strategic. I vow to make terrible jokes at inappropriate moments, because apparently that's how we got here. Victoria laughed through her tears. The officiant, a friend of Victoria's, someone she had known since before the company existed, pronounced them married. They kissed while Sophie cheered and the small crowd applauded, and somewhere nearby a bird began to sing. The reception was exactly what they had wanted. Ordinary. A cake from the bakery in the nearest town. Nothing fancy, but delicious. Food that people actually wanted to eat rather than food designed to impress. Music playing from speakers on the porch. Dancing on the grass. Sophie teaching Victoria moves she had learned at school. As the sun set and the fairy lights they had strung through the trees began to glow, Evan found himself standing at the edge of the garden, watching his wife, spin their daughter in circles on the lawn. You okay? Victoria had noticed him watching and come over, slightly breathless, her hair coming loose from its careful arrangement. Better than okay. He pulled her close. I was just thinking about how we got here. A stupid joke at a birthday party. That's all it took. It wasn't the joke. The joke was just the beginning. Victoria rested her head against his shoulder. It was everything after. The conversations, the dinners, the moments when we chose to be honest instead of careful. That's what got us here. And Sophie's dinosaur obsession. That certainly helped. They watched their daughter, now attempting to teach Marcus the same dance moves with less success. The garden was full of laughter and warmth, the house glowing with light, everything ordinary and extraordinary at once. No regrets? Evan asked. Not one. You? Only that I didn't propose on purpose sooner. The accidental proposal had a certain charm. I try. Sophie came running toward them, her flower crown askew, her dress grass-stained, her face bright with joy. "Daddy! Mom! Mrs. Patterson says it's almost time to cut the cake. Can I help? Can I hold the knife? Please, please, please." "You can help," Victoria said. "But Daddy and I will hold the knife. Safety first, remember?" Safety first, adventure second. Sophie grabbed both their hands, pulling them toward the cake table. "Come on, come on, come on. The cake has purple flowers on it because purple is my favorite, and the cake lady put them there special." They let themselves be dragged across the lawn, surrounded by the people they loved, toward a cake with purple flowers and a future they would build together. Behind them, the cottage stood solid and welcoming, filled with memories they had made and space for memories yet to come. What began as a joke had become something real. What started as an accident had become a choice. Two broken people had found each other, chosen each other, built something neither of them had dared to hope for. It wasn't the life Victoria had been expected to lead or the life Evan had imagined for himself. It was better. Not because it was perfect, but because it was true. Because every moment of it had been chosen deliberately, built intentionally, maintained with the kind of daily devotion that transforms ordinary life into something extraordinary. Years later, when Sophie was grown and telling her own version of the story, how her dad accidentally proposed to her mom at a birthday party, and somehow it worked out, people would ask if it was true. If love could really begin with a careless comment and grow into something lasting. Sophie would smile, thinking of dinosaur books and microscopes and purple flowers. Thinking of her parents dancing in the garden, still choosing each other, still figuring it out, still doing everything badly and awkwardly and perfectly right. "It's true," she would say. Every word. Sometimes the most honest thing you can say is something you didn't mean to say at all. And sometimes the best decisions are the ones that don't make sense on paper. "Then marry me," her father had said, tired and thoughtless, meaning nothing. "Yes," her mother had answered, months later, meaning everything. And from that improbable beginning, they had built something real, a family, a home, a love story that belonged entirely to them. Not a fairy tale, not a rescue, not a transaction. Just three people who found each other and chose to stay. Just ordinary life, made extraordinary by the simple act of showing up, every day, in ways big and small, together.